month, NASM is giving you free courses. That's right, free courses each month just for being part of the NASM family. Learn about everything ranging from nutrition to strength, weight loss to stress relief, and everything in between. Click the link in the bio for information and to claim your free course before they're gone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable. My name is Wendy Batts, and I am here with my fellow Master Instructor as well as my better half, Mr. Tony Ambler-Wright. So, Tony, how are you?
Doing fantastic. Hey, everyone.
Really excited about today's episode because we have two amazing special guests. We are joined today with Aaron Nelson, who is the Vice President of Player Care and Performance for the NBA's New Orleans Pelicans. So, Aaron, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
and we also have Mike Elliott, who is the VP of Performance Healthcare for the NBA's Utah Jazz. So, Mike, thank you as well for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, Tony, do you want to kick us off? We've got so many questions for you guys.
We do. Gosh, don't know where to begin. I guess probably the most obvious place is to just start with, what you do in your current role. So as a VP, Aaron, as a VP of Player Care and Performance for the Pelicans, and Mike as a VP of Performance Healthcare for the Jazz, what does that actually mean? What do you do day to day? And we can kind of dovetail from there and dive deeper into some topics as they come up.
Well, I think the easiest way is, come in at 9, punch the card out, and that's pretty much it for the day. It's grown. The roles really grown, and I know Mike will have some really good perspective, but overseeing the sports medicine, the performance, the training, the mental health, nutrition, and having an incredible staff around to head up those areas and just kind of direct to make sure that we have everything that our players need to stay injury free and hopefully perform at a really high level.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think as kind of Aaron alluded to, things have changed quite a bit over time. We were working together on a staff of 3 people back in the day, and now we've got a staff upwards of 10. And so it's, managing those people and the different diverse things that they represent with inside of the group, from athletic training to strength and conditioning to sports science to nutrition to mental health, and kind of, creating a structure and a framework to be able to intervene with your players on a daily basis, but also maintain communication within our group so that we know where anyone is at any given time, the way that they're feeling, and how we can, further intervene to get them in a better place. So.
That's well, I have a question basically for both of you, because you are in incredible roles and you're working with the NBA, which is a dream for so many trainers as well as athletic trainers. And so can you tell us, how did you get into your job, like your position that you're in today? Like, where did your journey start, and then how did you get to where you are?
You want to go first, Mike? Do you want me to go?
Sure. No, I'll go, because you got me to where I am really at the end of the day. So I got interested in athletic training when I started as a ball boy for the Suns. I think I was in 7th grade when I started. I got to know Aaron while I was in high school. He came on to the Suns athletic training staff as their assistant athletic trainer, I think in 92. Is that right, Millie?
Yeah, 92-93 season.
Yeah. And so I was definitely a youngster back then, but I realized, kind of being around the training room and in the locker room, that it was a cool environment. I was always interested in athletics, fancied myself as an athlete, but then kind of came to my senses. And started studying athletic training when I was in high school because of everything that I had been around with the Suns back behind the scenes, and chose to go to school at Arizona State, study athletic training there. I was working in the locker room for the Suns during that time as well, and Aaron created an internship opportunity for me my 5th year at Arizona State. It took me 5 years for whatever reason at ASU to graduate, but you know, created that opportunity for me, got my foot in the door, got to meet a lot of people. And after that, I moved on to work at a physical therapy clinic in Tempe, Arizona, just for a short period of time, transitioned to the NBA's D League, which is now the G League, but the minor league at the time in South Carolina. Worked there for a season, came back to Phoenix, and Aaron had a job available on his staff. He hired me at that point in time. And I stayed there with him for 15 years, and then served in various different roles there, from assistant trainer to assistant strength coach to director of rehab to head strength coach to director of performance, and then moved on to this current role with the Jazz. I've been here for 4 years now.
Yeah, Mike summed it up. You know, I want to say, obviously, part of success in a professional environment is having a unique team and a team that communicates and gets along really well. And, you know, watching Mike grow up, like he said, as a young fella. I was actually really young. I think when I was 23 when I started as an assistant, 30 when I took over as the head athletic trainer. And, you know, Mike is an incredible person and even more so professional. You know, he fulfilled roles and duties that we wanted to have. And it's interesting back then because, like Mike said, early on we had 3 people, and now staffs have, you know, 8 to 12 or sometimes even more. And so to try to bring someone in and add someone back then wasn't always easy to do. But I couldn't wait to have Mike join us, especially at a young age, and start similar to where I did at a young age and grow. And man, he's obviously been incredible, had an incredible journey and doing great things. So that part's great. And so from where I came from, similar, grew up in a small town in Iowa, played 4 sports, loved sports. My mom was a nurse, decided I wanted to go into sports medicine. No idea what an athletic trainer was. By the time I was a junior, senior in high school, learned what an athletic trainer was, ended up going to Iowa State, who at the time had supposedly the best internship program. So it was basically hands-on right off the bat as a freshman. Now it's all academic. Went to Iowa State, was going to go to, actually started out pre-med, then went to pre-PT, then decided I was going to go to BT school, got hired by the Suns. I worked for a couple of their arena teams, got hired by the Suns, and ended up going to ASU, starting my master's there, and then finishing it later at Cal, PA, and was with the Suns from 92, 93 season through 2000 when I became the head athletic trainer. I was there for 26 total years, 26 total years, and then came to the Pelicans 2 years ago. So I'm entering year 29, and that's the course. And it's been a fun ride. It's been a lot of growth and looking for when I was the assistant athletic trainer to now the VP of player care and performance. Totally different league, totally different, people we're working with, not only as athletes, but within our environment and people we have to deal with outside of our environment. So it's been an interesting journey, to say the least.
Yeah, sounds like it. You guys miss working together?
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. I mean, we love it. Mike's awesome, and you hate to break up something great. You think you might get over it at some point, but Mike said we were together 15, 16 years, way more so his ball kid. You just grow and you like each other professionally and personally, and that doesn't always happen everywhere. So
yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned it before, Nelly. You didn't know what an athletic trainer was. I think just for our audience, to create some distinction there, would you guys mind sharing a little bit about what an athletic trainer does? What do you wish that everybody kind of understood about being an athletic trainer? How is that different from, let's say, working as a personal trainer or as a strength and conditioning coach? Obviously, there's a lot of different directions, very similar maybe in terms of the school required from an undergraduate perspective, and then at some point there's a branch off, and if you're an athletic training major, there's other requirements and things you have to do. If you go into exercise science or exercise phys, there's other things you have to do. So would you mind just breaking that down for the audience and kind of describe what an athletic trainer does, particularly in the pro sports environment, and then over time, and then we can discuss how that has evolved over time, your time in the league.
I think we've obviously seen it evolve. When I started as an athletic trainer, so it's 4 years of school minimum. Graduate with your degree and then sit for your board certification and take your exam. And then it's grown now to the point where you do your 4 years undergrad, and then it's a graduate degree program. So you're going to go the extra 2 years and or however long it takes. And most of us have done that anyway. The ones that start out with 4 year program and end up going to get our masters and that. So it's grown dramatically. I guess the big thing is there is a difference. We're recognized as medical professionals. So we're trained in a lot of different areas, from exercise science and injury prevention and more from a sports medicine and some strength and conditioning, nutrition. We've getting bits and pieces of everything. But the big bulk part is, for people that don't know what an athletic trainer is, I think most do, but if you watch sport, those that run out onto the floor, onto the court, or on the field, and attend to the athlete when they get injured, that's usually the athletic trainer, and sometimes in our at this level, the team doctor may come out as well. Mike, you have anything to add from that?
No, not really. I think when Aaron and I kind of worked together, we talked about athletic training, and Aaron was big on kind of like varying your background. So when I went to school, I wasn't just going to specialize in basketball, even though I knew I wanted to be there. He was like, work as many different sports as you can, get exposed to all those different sports, the injuries that accompany those sports. And then at the same time, consider strength and conditioning certifications to, again, vary your background to make you a little more versatile when it comes to entering the workplace at some point in time. So, at some point for us, we kind of blurred the lines between the two. And a big thing for Aaron, and big thing that I took here was, when he stepped into the role as the head athletic trainer for the Suns, and the role that he sits in now, it's kind of knocking down the walls that figuratively can exist between the weight room and the training room, and try to bring your staffs together so that they can communicate effectively. He's realized, and I realized over the years, that's the only way you can really provide, great quality care to your athletes and to be able to serve your organization the way that it should be served. So yeah, there certainly is a distinction kind of on the medical side for an athletic trainer, but we both kind of carry strength and conditioning certifications as well to make sure that we can understand what our staff is experiencing on a day-to-day, but we can also pull everyone together and try to speak the same language.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, Elliott, you obviously know that, having the importance of having a mentor, which I know that you have, a huge respect for Aaron. And Aaron, of course, you've been around in the league for so long as well. But, we all have kind of a mentor that that's a common person. So we look at someone like Mike Clark. And when you guys were introduced and you actually took the NASM methodologies and implemented it into the Suns, you guys were the first team to really do that. And you had such success with low injury rates, and you were able to take the methodologies and put it into what you guys do with your athletes. And then we saw an increase in performance, and we saw more players actually playing. So how was that? Because you guys were the first to really do that, and you took kind of a leap of faith in this, protocol that not a lot of people had really started out using. So was it a shock to you when you saw it? Did it make sense to you? Like, how did you really start to use, especially the CES, so the corrective exercise? How did you put that into play? And then, what made you just go all in? Because you guys did, and there was a positive of, there was positive reinforcement after the fact, but you didn't really know that when you started, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I mean, the approach is different than what was traditional. and working with Mike Clark early on and getting to know him in '98, and I'm listening to him and watching the way things are approached. I was like, wow, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I don't understand it fully because this wasn't my background, and he would rattle it off, and I'd ask him to call and leave messages so I could actually listen to the message over a few times before okay. And to that being said, when the initial PES and CS began, actually he gave me the manuscript, so I have the old binder, like handwritten notes and stuff in it in a box, and I have it. I think I brought it to New Orleans with me, so hopefully I have that for all time sake. It's historical documents.
Got to take pictures of that and turn it into like an NFT or something. Worth a lot of money,
right? I mean, there's like I don't know how many. A dozen, 20 different little binders of it. But that being said, when talking to him and trying to figure out a different approach, and early on, I guess this filled the void of injury prevention, and that's a lot of what athletic training is about, is injury prevention, and then obviously care and rehab. But performance wasn't as big as it is now, and then now recovery and everything else. We can talk about that later if we want, but going back to that, trying to initiate a plan or a philosophy around a different approach to treat individuals and help keep them on the court in our case, and then finding the people around like Mike and Casey and a strong enough unit that could support that and do it. And we were fortunate. I think NASM was in Calabasas at that point, and I was spending a lot of time flying back and forth, alone and with athletes, meeting with Mike and some of the NASM staff, and learning a lot about it. And then going to our general manager, who was Brian Colangelo at the time, and just saying, hey, here's what I'd like to do. And I was still within my first contract. And I'm like, this better go well, or we're out, and it won't go well. And fortunately for us, it went really well, and we're, to be able to dramatically decrease the games lost due to injury was huge. But guys were playing at a much better level, but you don't know that because performance wasn't talked about it as the way it's talked about now. So that's kind of the beginning of it. And then Mike was coming right out of college, so he'd probably give you a better feel for the bridging the gap, so quickly between college, where I was actually out of college for, at that point when I took over 7, probably 8 years. So there's a little bit of gap. Mike jumped in pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty similar experience with Mike, where he would work with us game nights, and I would learn from him as he was kind of working with players on the table. So he would assess range of motion, and he would kind of inhibit certain structures, lengthen others. He would do mobilizations, and I would sit there and at the beginning just kind of watch as an intern and try to figure out what in the world was going on. And as Aaron said, he could speak for 2 minutes, but there's probably 2 hours worth of material in those 2 minutes. And I would unpack it. I honestly would unpack it for days or weeks at a time, each game night. And things would start to make sense over this long period of time for me. And then when he published the PES and the CES, it pulled everything together for me. I certainly had a leg up on a lot of people to be able to learn from him directly, to teach me hand placement, to teach me kind of how the kinetic chain functioned, what dysfunctions, could lead to what, all sorts of different things that certainly are in the PES and the CES, but, Aaron and I and our group was extremely lucky to learn from him himself, kind of one-on-one.
Yeah, that's great. And I know Wendy mentioned this, but we both benefited as well from some direct mentorship and guidance from Mike. And so that's great to hear. Obviously the transition from, focusing more on acute care management and rehab to injury prevention is huge. And at the time, that movement first approach wasn't as popular probably as it is today. Would you agree that, more teams, more organizations approach how they take care of their athletes from a movement first perspective, or is it still not as prevalent as you think it should be?
No, I think it's much more scientific now. I think everyone has some sort of an assessment that they utilize to kind of apprise where their athlete is at any point in time, and then they design their own interventions based off of those assessments. And for us, that was introduced to us by Mike. I think when I was in school, it was this guy sprained his knee. Okay, what are we going to do for his knee? Or he sprained his ankle. What are we going to do for his ankle? He strained his hamstring. What are we going to do for his hamstring? And Mike, was the first person to introduce to me, hey, there's other things going on within this person's body that have led to these certain injuries and ailments. If you can intervene ahead of time, you could possibly prevent these things. And certainly took a lot of learning and, as Aaron said, a leap of faith. But he certainly saw the benefit of that. But I think we're at the point now where everyone has some sort of scientific method that they employ with their athletes, and it certainly, I think, has benefited everyone.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, I know for me, if it makes you guys feel better, when Mike talked to me, I would say the same thing. Like, okay, wait a minute, you got to come down to my level because I have no idea what you're saying to me right now. And I thought I was super smart at the time, but realized very quickly that I
you guys are both ASU grads, right? I mean,
there we go. There we go.
All right, you know what? You're going to stay in that basement.
Yeah. For all of you listening and watching in, I've been relegated to the basement. I was joking, isn't the first time, but anyway.
Well, I was going to ask if you guys can share some insight on this, because, as someone that doesn't understand what goes on behind the scenes, when you're watching a game, or if you go to a game and you're a spectator and you're watching your team play, you see the guys come out, they're running and they're doing their shots, and every once in a while they'll get down and one of you guys or some strength and conditioning coach will stretch them or do some stuff. But can you just give the listeners an understanding of what happens pre-game behind the scenes? Because it's not just, hey, they show up, they put on their uniform and they go out and they shoot some free throws or whatever. I think it's important to understand there is the process, and then how do you manage that with the team? Because there's just one or two of you. Even if you had a staff of 10, there's more guys there than you have staff for. So how do you manage that and get everyone ready to play their best?
I think that's grown as well. Initially, Mike could tell you early on, because the staffs are so small, you take care of your starters, or at least your main guys, and in daily stuff. Getting ready for practice, post-practice, pre-game, post-game, guys that you could handle. You couldn't get everybody through. And then it's grown now where, in our case, all 15 players that are here will get table work and then go in and do corrective exercise before practice and before games. And everybody's a little bit different. So and it's important that everybody's tailored to what they need. It's different. So we getting them on the table and doing one thing for one guy is different than the next guy, and then putting them in. Sure, you can do some group stuff in the corrective exercise area, and we have a great staff here that is really good about moving guys through and grouping guys when they need to get grouped or individualizing, and that's the way it is now. And Mike will tell you too, it's grown. More and more guys want something immediately before the game. So more and more staff is going out, whether it's stretching, doing some type of a warm-up, extra warm-up, maybe even some joint mobilization. Maybe it's a little bit of everything, in all honesty. And maybe they run back to the locker room and get a little extra work on the table as well. But Mike can share that too. That's really evolved and grown over the years. Because if you go to a game, you'll see a lot of players at center court on each side doing a little bit different things.
Yeah, as Nelly said, back in the day, you can only see a handful of guys really before the game, because there were really, at one point in time, it was Aaron and myself in the training room, and then we had a strength coach in the weight room. And so the two of us were trying to get through as many people as we could. And the staffs have grown at this point in time to where we've got, 8 to 10, depending on what organization you work for, 8 to 10 staff members who are with the team, in various roles, athletic trainers, PTs, strength and conditioning coaches. And so from a pregame perspective, we try to take a regimented approach where we schedule time for guys on the table. We schedule time for them to get into the weight room, and then they schedule time to get onto the court to get their pregame warm-up. That affords us the opportunity, if we've got 4 people or so providing the manual therapy and joint mobilizations, it gives them time to see each individual person that they are accustomed to working with, and then we can send those 4 people to the weight room, which, depending on where you are in the league, is of differing size. There's some places where you're working in the tunnel, on the way out to the court. There's places where you're working back in a hallway. There's places that have like a nice proper weight room for you, but that affords kind of small group opportunities to get in there and to get moving, and then that gives an opportunity to get to the court as well. So we try to schedule everything out so everyone knows where they're supposed to be at any given time, so that nothing falls between the cracks. And then what we try to do is keep the same 2, 3, 4 people that I work with. I try to do that every single game night so that I can see what their impairments are over time and try to intervene accordingly. I'll update corrective exercise, walk straight into our strength and conditioning and staff and say, hey, I saw these 2 new things on the table today. Can you tweak his corrective exercise to reflect those things? Can you change some of this targeted self-stretch, that sort of thing? And then, during the course of the game, when the fans are watching to see whether or not their team wins or loses, I think, Aaron would agree, 2 of us are out there kind of looking more at how people are moving at any point in time. So trying to identify, any impairments that might be popping up or anything that we might need to intervene with after the game or even the next morning. So,
yeah. Well, that's awesome. There's quite a bit. I want to dive a little bit deeper on there. One, I guess, when you talk about that process from getting on the table, doing soft tissue work, joint mobilizations, and so forth, and then the athlete transitioning into the weight room for some correctives, to finally getting on the court, how long does that process usually take, just to give our listeners some perspective? Because I think one of the challenges that we continually run into at NASM with some of our courses and the methodology is the practical application and the utility of corrective exercise. How do you fit all this stuff into a comprehensive program and still have enough time to do some training, strength and conditioning, stuff that's going to move the needle as it relates to fitness or performance goals? And so I think any opportunity to highlight that, corrective exercise doesn't have to be this, super long blown out program, but something that if you address continually on a regular basis, that the time that you need to dedicate to it may be much less than what people realize. And so if you could shed some light on that process, and also just kind of go into what drives that process. How do you determine what areas to do soft tissue and joint mobs on prior to going into the correctives? I think that would be really beneficial and valuable for our listeners.
Tony, I think you hit it right on the head that you've got to be consistent, and as long as you're doing the corrective exercise and the table work and the stuff consistently, then sure, you don't have to spend an exorbitant amount of time to do it. Now you might have a guy that wakes up with something that he happened in the game the night before, or from a bus ride or from airplane, slept in the bed wrong, whatever, and you might have to spend some extra time. But typically from a table work, getting them on the table, 20 to 30 minutes max, and we could reduce that. We could literally hit specific areas, but we try to go a little extra, and as long as the guys are here and we have the time to do it. So it's 20 to 30 minutes, and then same thing in the weight room, 20 to 30 minutes of corrective exercise, and then lifting if they need to lift. What we've done, which again, you have to have communication and understand and appreciate the people you're working with. If for whatever reason a wrench gets thrown in, the coach wants these 4 guys out on the court to do some extra walkthrough stuff, instructional stuff, and something gets messed up, now we have to decide what's more important, the table work or the corrective exercise. Well, they're both important. So if there's 4 guys, we might know they might need to do a little bit more stuff on the table. The others can go in the weight room more, and we'll flip it. So then the time gets split up more. Or if they're like, you have 1 hour or you have 45 minutes today to do your routine with the guys, then we'll be like, okay, today we can probably get through and you do hypervolt, and we'll get the guys out in 15 minutes, and then we can have a full 30 minutes in the weight room and do extra stuff. But in all honesty, I've heard that at a lot of different levels and in a lot of different sports that I just don't have time. You can make time, because even if you pick 3 or 4 corrective exercises and 3 or 4 things on the table to do, and then maybe you followed up with some dynamic stretching or something, you could be done with a person, if it was just one person, in 20 minutes if you wanted to, just by doing the bare minimum. And you're still going to make some changes. Now at this level, we're trying to give them as much time as we can. So maybe some extra stuff's done after. But if you really want to bring in, you have 30 guys and you want to get them through, you probably can get them through in groups, depending on the size of your staff, in a much smaller amount of time, by isolating and figuring out what group needs to be. Maybe it's a hip group that they really have tight hip internal rotation. This is a lower extremity foot and ankle, because their toe or their ankles, the dorsiflexion is terrible, and we want them to do something. So you can do different things and different ways to set it up. It's not difficult. And again, it doesn't have to be, we got to get 20 exercises done in the weight room. We've got to get an hour's worth of work on the table. Would the guys love to lay on the table for an hour? Absolutely. It's like going to get a massage, but more painful. So, to that extent, you can facilitate whatever time is allotted. Mike.
Yeah, so we take an approach kind of on a game night where we try to get everybody slotted for 20 minutes on the table and 15 minutes in the weight room. And corrective exercise for us on the game night looks a little bit different than it does on a practice day. And same thing really from a manual therapy perspective. On a game night, we take a really targeted approach with 20 minutes and we have an understanding with each individual athlete kind of where they are at any point in time, but we certainly use a goniometer to measure range of motion before we intervene. And then we measure again after to make sure that what we did was effective and that we gained the desired result. And then kind of on a game night from an activation corrective exercise perspective, we may target 1 or 2 things on the table to activate before they get to the weight room. And then in the weight room, we try to turn on their TVA. We try to turn on their glute med or max. We take a more dynamic approach with like a multi-joint, multi-planar movement. And then we use something that's more reactive because they're about to play in a game. So we really got to try to get them feeling reactive prior to that. Then on a practice day, a little bit different, where we can take a more kind of deliberate approach to corrective exercise. As Aaron said, if you have someone who has limited hip internal rotation, we can spend some more time diving into that dysfunction on a practice day because we're afforded more time to do so. Game night, you're certainly trying to get everybody feeling good, but feeling ready for the game, feeling bouncy, get them out to the court. On a practice day, we can really dive into some of those dysfunctions, those impairments, try to make some changes.
Well, I think, I think the way that you guys are telling us a lot about this corrective exercise and being able to identify with each player what they need specifically. And obviously we're all about individualization because that's, every person is different. We move different, we play different, we do everything differently. But when do you guys how do you do your assessments? Do you do it at the beginning of the season? And then what assessments do you feel are the most important to give you the information for each player? Because, we hear, they must, they play at a high level. So is it how much they bench, how much they squat, or is that even important? Because we think if they're at a high level, we need to do the most high level and get, these numbers. But in your experience, is that true? And also what assessments do you feel are most important and why?
I think this strength is incredibly important, but movement's more important than anything. You could be as strong as an ox and not move well, and you're going to underperform. And when things that we're measuring as far as like training loads go, you're working a lot harder, so you're going to wear out a lot faster. So number one, you need to move well. So I don't want to take that away from strength, because strength is important, but again, moving well is number one. So that being said, we do preseason, postseason assessments, and then do it depends, 2 to 4 weeks assessments. And then we'll do quick check assessments when they come in, particularly if they came in, they're like, my ankle feels stuck, or, hey, I have a little knee tendonitis, or my back's a little stiff. We might spend a little more extra time, but using a goniometer, like Mike says, check hip internal rotation, knee 90, the hamstring 90-90, ankle dorsiflexion, first empty key joint. You can do all that in 2 minutes and have a pretty good idea of what's going on and looking for symmetry, right to left. Maybe, they feel something on the left side, but it's actually coming from the right side. So we can address that really quickly. Spend literally, from manual therapy or joint mobilization, some neuromuscular stretching, you can spend 5 minutes and probably correct most of that stuff. So if you can address that, particularly in a practice, like Mike said, you don't have as much time on a game night, but in a practice, if a guy's coming in, we know they're going to be out on the court. If we can eliminate some of the risk factors that could cause injury, at this point, we're not worried about them performing well because it's not a game where they're in a practice. We just don't want them to get hurt. So if we can eliminate that and save us some headaches down the road and spend literally less than 5 minutes to solve it, it's a no-brainer.
What are you doing in your preseason? Like for what are your go-to assessments when they come in the door?
So for us, range of motion, movement efficiency, and then we'll do some other testing. We'll do some force plate testing, some CMJ. We'll do less testing. Certainly over the course of the season, try to hit those in a serial fashion. So hit movement efficiency kind of first week of the month, second week of the month, hit range of motion, get back to the force plates and the various testing that we do there. And then the less testing, and then try to start over the following month. We do a biometric questionnaire with our guys, try to do that on a daily basis. So whether it's push to their phones or there's an iPad or there's a kiosk set up, they can input some information for us on a daily basis about the prior night's sleep, any soreness they might have, how their mood is, diet from the previous day, et cetera. It's just 10 questions. It's very quick to fill out. And we get some good information for that. And then it really just gives us an opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion with an athlete and say, hey man, I saw that your left knee is sore. What's going on? Tell me about that. Which is really helpful for us. Like we were saying earlier, back in the day, there were 3 of us on staff and you were having those one-on-one conversations every day. And now we've got more athletes, bigger staffs, and there's a bigger fight for time. So, can we get some of that information to kind of needle us to go have a conversation? I think that's been helpful for our group, certainly. So a number of things that we follow over time, and we try to use all of them. We really do. The only things that we're going to employ are those that are going to inform our decision-making process, change our interventions, and really kind of get our athletes to feel different over time. If we come across something that seems interesting, but we don't think it can be actionable, then we won't utilize it. So,
cool. Now, Mike, you mentioned a few things. So movement efficiency, just for our audience, movement efficiency testing would be looking at stuff like the overhead squat, single leg squat, certain range of motion or mobility assessments. You mentioned CMJ, counter movement jump, and then the LESS test, landing error scoring system. Would you mind just kind of sharing how, with the counter movement jump and the LESS, how you incorporate those or what you're looking for from those particular assessments? Just because those are things that we highlight in some of our courses, but I don't know if how often they get used. So it's nice to hear that you guys are using stuff like that, and would be great to get an understanding of what do you take away from that? Why do you do those types of assessments?
Yeah, so Aaron said earlier that movement is proper movement is the biggest thing in the world. And a big part of that is symmetry. So using force plates to assess symmetry on an exercise like a CMJ is big for us. So, are they overloading one side or the other when they're trying to create force? And are they overloading one side or the other when they're trying to dissipate force? And to follow that serially over time will help us change our interventions on the table in the weight room with our players. When it comes to the LESS test, we follow that over time as well, and that's a great way for us to see how they're able to dissipate and create force as well, because we do those on the force plates as well, and that's a little bit more dynamic task, asking them to step off of a box, land, and explode up again, and that just really kind of for us allows us to kind of attack the tip of the pyramid, some of the interventions that we design from a jump landing perspective, changing planes, those sorts of things, to make sure that they can do that properly in a dynamic environment, because at the end of the day, that's where they operate.
Yeah, pretty important for basketball for sure. And then, with symmetry, is there a particular benchmark or something that you guys are looking for as ideal, or a certain range?
It really depends on the individual athlete for us. We'll follow each one of them over time and try to see where they live. And there's certainly some benchmarks for each one of those guys that we design over time. And, to be able to follow them on a serial basis to get a monthly metric is huge. Just to try to prevent injury, because again, we can change the way that we intervene in the weight room and even in the training room. But then also from a return to play perspective, we understand where we need to get them back to safely return to the court.
Gotcha. It's interesting too, you mentioned just this battery of assessments that you guys do. Typically you might find with like a counter movement jump or some other force plate testing, if there's a discrepancy between one side or the other, it's probably common to just try to attack the underperforming side with more strength or power work. But that's where I think the importance of all the other assessments that you guys do come into play, because somebody can display asymmetries on one side, either eccentrically or concentrically, and it may not have anything to do with their actual strength or power capabilities. It could be range of motion driven, right? So do you guys find that after looking at some of the range of motion data, overlaying that with the force plate data, and then addressing some of those range of motion or mobility limitations, that it has a positive impact on their strength and performance with those?
Every single time. Like we overlay that stuff every single time with our guys. We've actually got our own website that our director of performance science has created. So each one of our guys has a page that we can pull up, and it has all of their metrics side by side. And it affords us the opportunity as a group, when we have our morning meetings, to go through each individual guy or targeted guys on a given day and just say, hey, look, here's where they are following testing. We can overlay everything and say, hey, look, his ability to create force on the CMJ on the right side's down a little bit. Let's dive into his range of motion and his movement efficiency today. We can quickly check those. And then we say, okay, right-sided hip internal rotation is decreased. Let's inhibit structures X, Y, and Z. We'll turn, structures A, B, and C on. Let's get them back to the force plates, and let's see if that's changed anything. So to be able to use that information to overlay it, to make sure everything's married up, is huge, because a lot of times that lets us be really efficient in the way that we care for our athletes.
Yeah, Tony, couple things around that. One, obviously, not everybody can have force plates, force X, and when we, most professional teams, if not all, do. So it's nice to be able to add, like Mike says, we do the same thing. Not everybody does the less test. They might use the force X or force plates, but we do it same thing, going onto a force deck, and so we get basically two tests in one. And that's nice, and it's great, because to your point, a lot of times historically it's, there's a weakness, there's something going on in strength, and it's really not. We can pull someone off and look how they're landing, while the other guy's going. If we have 4 players come through at a time, do a couple quick, some myofascia stuff, or some release techniques or joint mobilization that takes literally less than a minute, get them back on there, and everything's fine. Like, and you can look at the numbers in real time, which is great. Not everybody has that. And that being said, I think it's important, if as clinicians and practitioners that are training the average population, or training your kids at home, or training friends or whatever, if you have any type of baseline assessment, that's the most important thing. So you can go back to the traditional, like the left test, shark skills test, the Y test. I think the left test is great, particularly if you're training athletes, just so you can look at, potential ACL injury prevention issues. So as long as you have a baseline, and again, outside of like what Mike talked about, we do a lot of similar testing. We also have just baseline testing that we only do once. We do it at the very beginning of the year. There's maybe 6 tests. These other things that we do every couple of weeks or monthly are additional tests. But when an individual gets hurt, so if you're a practitioner, a clinician training, someone that wants to play softball, or they want to play in a kickball league, whatever that ends up being, and they get hurt, you can go back now and at least you have a baseline to see, are they within 10, 15% of what the number was, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or whatever. And it becomes very easy. But I think having some type of baseline, for everybody, not only, the personal trainer, but all the way up to people working with professional athletes, you have to have something, and you have to have something that you can track and then make, like Mike said, make actionable, that you can now look at the numbers and start looking, over a period of time. Am I seeing a decrease in hamstring strength? Is it what's the reason for that? Is it fatigue? Is there an injury? What's actually going on? So there's a lot of different uses, a lot of different ways, but I think as long as you have a baseline, and then you can start building around that baseline, you'll always have something to go back to if you're going to continue. Because think about, you probably hear this from your clinicians, practitioners that are just training people on a daily basis. Once they get hurt, they don't want to train anymore. They might lose clients and patients because they just don't want to train anymore. What I'm doing didn't work or didn't help, or I'm just mad and I'm not going to pay for someone to train me and I'm going to be hurt. So having something, having a way, and being able to show and visualize to that person, to that athlete, here's where you were, here's where you are now, and here's where we're going to get you back. And all these things and these tools we have, you just have to pick and choose the right ones.
Yeah, so well said. So important, especially for trainers and practitioners and coaches at all levels. You guys mentioned this before, but recovery, Mike, you mentioned the questionnaire that you have the guys do. What impact does sleep, soreness, what impact does that have on recovery? How does that change? Let's say a guy scores lower on that subjective questionnaire. How does that impact what you might do with them on a given day? And to piggyback off of that, sorry, I've got multiple questions here. With the advent of all these new recovery technologies and modalities, what type of impact have you seen those things have on, how players respond to playing and training?
Yeah. So the daily questionnaire gives us the opportunity to sit down with a player and kind of dive into what might be happening kind of when they're away from basketball and away from our facility or the game. And then it allows us to have a conversation with them, sort of an educational one about sleep and diet, nutrition. And, for each individual guy, it's going to depend on what they have, what they're coming home to, what their habits are. And it's going to be, if a player's exhibiting kind of some sleep interruption or can't get into a proper routine, we've got to understand it's going to be a long kind of battle to get them to change that side of their life. So many guys this day and age are really young and they want to stay up late and play video games. Plenty of these guys are new fathers and they have young children, and they're trying to help their wives get those kids down to sleep, and the kids' sleep's going to be interrupted, their sleep's going to be interrupted, all those sorts of things. So, what strategies can we put into place to help our guys, get to sleep quicker? So, can they turn off the blue lights? Can they get into a habit of reading? Can they get into a habit of turning down the lights and foam rolling and stretching before they go to bed? Can they try to get to bed 15 minutes earlier on a given night? And then can we 2 weeks later say, hey, can you try to go to sleep another 15 minutes earlier? A lot of education around sleep these days with our athletes. And then a lot of education as well with our coaching staff to try and tailor the start of practice to afford our guys the opportunity to sleep a little bit more. That's a huge one right now. Certainly diet and nutrition is big. We have young guys come to our team with really terrible habits when it comes to that. We're lucky. We have our chef is an RD who our players think is the best restaurant in town, and he is phenomenal when it comes to hiding veggies and all sorts of good things in their food, and they don't know what's in there. And all of a sudden he's like, "Hey man, you had a hamburger today, but it had X amount of mushrooms in it. Did you know that?" "No, I had no idea. I hate mushrooms." "Well, okay, actually now you like mushrooms." And so he's great about that, and that really gets a lot of buy-in for him. For an opportunity to sit down with guys and have one-on-one conversations about body composition, and then nutritional interventions that can help them improve that over time. And those are kind of two big things for us: is sleep and nutrition that can help really impact the way that a guy feels the day after a game or the day after a practice, so that he can maintain energy levels, and really at the end of the day maintain his readiness and be able to play and stay healthy over time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know that we're kind of coming up on to time, and I could literally talk to you guys all day, and I'm sure you have better things to do than to hang out with Tony and I and our crew.
I thought
However,
that was a 2-hour episode.
I'm sure they're like, oh, yeah, right? Hey, if you got the time, I'm here all day. But I have actually one final question, and it's really more about you guys, not just about the team. But you have been doing this for so many years, and you're both married, you have beautiful children. Like, how do you find the work-life balance? Because Tony and I mean, we have one kid and we struggle, and we're here all the time. You guys travel and have, multiple athletes to look after and literally make sure that they're healthy enough to play, so you guys get the stats on the board. However, how do you make it work personally?
It's challenging, and Mike got to see, before he got married, I was already married, and he got to see my kids, going through it. And it's hard trying to find that balance, to spend time with your wife, let alone your kids, and missing birthdays and school events. I missed two games in going on 29 years. And one of them was the birth of my second son. And my daughter was born as we came back from a trip from Portland, coming to Phoenix, which is a long flight, as Mike could tell you, back going from Portland to Phoenix in the time change, and had a back-to-back, and actually got back for the birth and then made the game, went back, so went 2 days without sleeping. So you make sacrifices, for your family to do it. I'm leaving. We have the draft on Thursday, and I'm leaving Friday for my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, who's in the Softball World Series in Florida. So I'm going to see that, literally turn around after they win the championship, and fly to Vegas for Summer League. So it's finding the gap. And right now, before school starts, I have two older boys, one that's going to be a freshman in high school, another one that's going to be in 6th grade. And my time is lifting, doing corrective exercise, working on vert, doing some vert plyometric training with my older one, and then doing some stability training with my 11-year-old, and throwing 500 balls in the batting cage every day to him, to the point where I can't see. I probably have a dead arm in the picture. So it's finding time to do it. And Mike and I've talked about this a lot, and it's hard. So it's a long-winded answer, but if anybody deserves any credit for anything we do, it's probably our wives, for all the extra time that they have to spend getting the kids to and from school and practices and games and all the activities they want to do, and friends' houses, and we're not around. Because, man, when the season's over and I come back, I'm like, how did you do all this? So
yeah. And Wendy, I'm glad you asked that question, because I think, for many professionals and practitioners, they aspire to be where the two of you are, working in professional sports. And I think, that side of things is greatly underappreciated. Just the time commitment that you have to put into doing your job, ensuring that everything gets done that needs to get done, and the sacrifices that have to be made. And so, it's certainly commendable. Wendy and I have both been able to kind of experience it as outsiders looking in, and it's amazing. And I don't think people really understand how much work it takes for you guys to do what you do behind the scenes. And then, secondary to that, what your families, the amount of work and effort they have to put in when you're not there. And so, Mike, I'd love to hear your insights too. And then just talk about, Nellie, you mentioned the summer league. I mean, literally, how much time do you get off? If you think about the typical person, working individual, or fitness professional, where there's some flexibility and latitude with scheduling, like what does a year look like at the end of the day in terms of how much time you get off and you're not working?
During COVID or not during COVID? What do we?
Gosh.
There's no such thing as a weekend. Seemingly even in the summer now. Whether they're pre-draft workouts, we have players coming in town to spend some time with us in the summer. Somebody's always in the building. And so we try to, coordinate coverage with our staff to afford people some time off, certainly. Aaron was always big about pushing us out to have vacation. I do the same thing with my staff now. So, I think we're a bigger staff now, so we're able to get people out of the building to go have vacation and spend time with their families and reconnect. My youngest last night came walking down the stairs with my phone in his hand, and he's like, "Look, I'm Daddy," and he's 2 years old. I'm like, "Okay, awesome." So it certainly is a very demanding job. Like I said, not a lot of weekends, not a ton of vacation time. Traditionally, Summer League is in Las Vegas in July, and when that ceases, everyone there's this mass exodus out of town. People stay out of the building, and then you kind of reconvene after Labor Day. So everyone sort of, from a time off perspective, looks forward to August. That's really your opportunity to get out. But otherwise, it's demanding in season. There's not a lot of days off. Plenty of times where you have an off day on the road, which doesn't mean that you have an opportunity to connect with your family or get any errands done or offload anything, for your better half. And really, if you do the math at the end of the day and you have a wife and kids and you're out of town for 120, 130 plus days a year, you're missing out on years of people's lives, doing these sorts of jobs. So, before you get into it, you got to have a good understanding of that. It takes a lot of dedication. It takes an understanding spouse and partner, and you've got to do everything you can when you have that time with your family to take advantage of it. I've got our oldest is 5 years old, and he had 10 soccer games this year, and I got to 2 of them. So you have to have that understanding before you get into this, as to what that means from a time spent perspective, and then really take advantage of the opportunities, the small opportunities you do have to dive into your families.
Wendy, Tony, to put that in perspective, what Mike was saying, I think I shared this with Mike. I've shared it with just a few people, not very many. But right before I left Phoenix to come here, I was looking. I went back. I also did travel for the team, so I knew when we were leaving, when we were out of town. So I went back from the point that all 3 of my kids were born until at that point. And my oldest son at the time was 11. My middle son was about 8.5. My daughter was about 6.5. And to put in perspective, my 11-year-old at the time, I had missed, I think it came out to 3.8 years of his life just from road travel. So that to put in perspective. And then on top of that, how often do we get to see them at home? If we have home games, you get up before they go to school, they come home, we're already back at the arena for the games. So you go days at home where you don't even see them. So, it's hard. And particularly, I think, like Mike said, pre-COVID or post-COVID, it's, with a condensed season, I think I went at one point like seven or so days when I was in town where I saw my kids maybe once or twice. So it's not great. So again, you have to take advantage and let them know that you love them and you're there for them and do whatever you can.
No, I think that's it's amazing because, I hear so many times, especially with me teaching, that people aspire to be you guys. But then again, their family life is the most important thing, and they don't want to give any of that up. And it's like, and I think with you guys being as honest as you have been, it lets the world know that it's way harder than it looks, because it looks like it's a fantastic lifestyle. You get to travel and work with all these professionals. However, there's a ton of work. There's so much education you have to have. And you have to be committed not only to your team, but your wife really needs to be committed to you.
For sure. For sure.
Well, guys, I know that this went a little long, but I have one final question, and this is actually for Mike. And Mike, we did a podcast with Grant Hill, and you were brought up multiple times, as well as you, Aaron. But Mike, because Mike worked one-on-one with Grant, especially before the games, and he was calling you Cowboy. And so can you tell everyone why they call you Cowboy? And that way we can clear up, any confusion.
I think most people in the league think that that's my actual name.
Yes.
Most people don't call me Mike. And they certainly don't know what my last name is. I got that nickname during my 5th year at ASU, Tony, because it's an enjoyable place.
Yes.
Super fun, by the way.
It is super fun, that's why it takes 5 years to graduate there. But my 5th year, during my internship with the Suns, the team went on a road trip. I have this kind of various presentation of my knee, these nice bowed legs. Team goes on a road trip. I decide to go snowboarding for the first time. Friends go up a lift. They go off to the right. It's the easy one, the easy run. I was separated behind them on the lift. I thought they went left. That was a bad choice. Went to grab my board to get up. Herniated a disc in my back, and went down, had a couple beers, took a nap, couldn't get out of bed once I woke up. And for, I don't know, Nelly, how long was it? Like a 2-year period? I tried to rehab and not have surgery.
Yeah.
And I, got this presentation of my knees, and all of a sudden I have to walk in like a lumbar extension, and I'm swaying side to side. And one of our players, Stefan Marbury, is like, "You look like you just got off a horse." And then he started calling me Cowboy. And like literally that day, everyone's like, "Okay, you're not Mike anymore." And so it was Cowboy. It's been that since. So.
That's a great story. Yeah, and, Wendy mentioned that our other show that she does with Ken, Random Fit. Great interview with Grant Hill, but that's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Nelly, that's an easy one to kind of figure out. Aaron Nelson, but yeah. Cowboy, that's a great one.
That is a great one. Well, guys, we want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us, talking to our audience, letting everyone know, what it takes to do what you do, and also just sharing your experiences, as well as, how you guys have become so great at your profession. So we want to say thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this again soon.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. And thanks for pulling us together. It was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate your time, fellas, as always. Enjoy the rest of your week, and enjoy your vacations coming up.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Guys, great
All
seeing
right.
you.